Is it incompetence or is it deliberate? Let's put that to our next guest, Deputy Comment Editor at the Daily Telegraph, Annabel Denham. A very good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good, my darling. Incompetence or deliberate sabotage by this government? On a daily basis, my mouth drops further open, Annabel.
I'm almost done trying to rationalise what it is that Keir Starmer is trying to achieve. You know, he's got this whopping majority and absolutely no direction, no agenda, no seemingly guiding philosophy. You know, this is somebody who, before he came into power, was a self-professed socialist. And you almost think, you know, at least if he was pursuing some more radical left-wing agenda, you would understand what it is that he stands for. He keeps telling us that he's acting in the British national interest, and yet he also keeps surrendering major strategic assets, you know, refusing to call China an adversary, let alone an enemy. And, you know, he's obviously determined to retain his position as a bridge between America and Europe. But you have to wonder for how much longer he's going to be able to walk that diplomatic tightrope. So if that's the sort of international position, well, domestically, it's even worse. We've just had the inflation data. It's gone up. So it's almost reaching double the Bank of England's target. You've got a huge number of people now who are receiving universal credit. Unemployment is up, employment is down. All of the economic data points are worsening. And you just ultimately wonder how much more our position is going to be able to deteriorate in the 3.5 years that this Labour government's got left.
You know, it's interesting, isn't it, when you chew the fat and you think to yourself, how, you said it, you're almost out of superlatives. I come in here genuinely every day and I hope and want to do a show that isn't based around his incompetence. But you look at what Trump said overnight, you look at the Chagos Islands. We found a clip from the then Foreign Secretary David Lammy back in February, Annabel. Listen to the, because this Chagos deal that Starmer's pinned his hopes on, listen to what his Foreign Secretary said in February.
If President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go forward. And the reason for that is because
it's going really well.
If President Trump doesn't like the deal will not go forward. And the reason for that is because we have a shared military and intelligence interest with the United States. And of course they've got to be happy with the deal or there is no deal.
Right, eventually it did play. So Lammy, as Foreign Secretary in February, Annabel, saying the deal won't happen. And you wonder, I mean, as I said to many people this morning, being on air yesterday and that sort of dropping and then realising what Simon Danczuk said to me, which is the sheer hypocrisy of Starmer on the one hand saying, you can't march into Greenland, Greenlanders should decide, but she didn't give the Chagosians a heartbeat. And more importantly to our viewers and listeners, apart from the sovereignty issue, trying to look good on the international stage as what, some sort of human rights guru, 34.7 billion quid when we're trillions in debt. Ludicrous, financially, morally, in every way. And you sort of think that now Trump's got involved and you look at Lammy, it's not going to happen, is it, Annabel? Another U-turn on the cards, 100%.
I think it will depend on how the Parliamentary Labour Party respond to this, Jeremy, because they will not like the idea that the Prime Minister, this Labour government, is being bounced into a U-turn because of the US President. Let's not forget that many members of the Labour Party have been very vocal in their condemnation, vitriolic in their condemnation of Donald Trump. So, you know, let's just see over the next few days how it plays out. And in any case, I think we've got some other Starmer U-turns taking place before then. Labour last year, I think, were a bit like the cat who got the cream when it came to Chagos, because it did seem to have the short-term superficial support of the Trump administration. Figures like Marco Rubio coming out and lending their support to it. But it was always quite clear that Trump simply wasn't across the details of this deal.
Do you think it was that, or do you think he was? Do you think it was detail? I know you're gonna say Jets. Don't be so wide-eyed. Do you not think he's that intelligent that he might have kept it in his back pocket for a situation like Greenland and has played everybody like a good one, Annabel Denham?
Well, my feeling is that it just hadn't really got into his in tray properly. And I suspect that Nigel Farage actually has helped raise the salience of the Chagos issue with the US president as well behind the scenes. What we can be pretty confident of now, Jeremy, is that the US president is going to stand firm with his current position, because not only did we have that explosive Truth Social post accusing us of great stupidity yesterday, but he has also gone on the airwaves to explain his shift in position. And of course, he's absolutely right. There's zero justification for this. And what's awkward for Keir Starmer is that he has previously justified the Chagos surrender on grounds that it had the support of our allies. Well, now that America is very vocally opposed, this is one of our key allies, if not our most important ally, are we going to see the Prime Minister, at the very least, he's going to have to try to find a way to keep both sides on board.
But you see, that for me,
very difficult for him.
That for me is the reason that he is so impotent and incompetent. I do not defend Donald Trump in everything, but I get the distinct feeling that the way to deal with Donald Trump is to stand up to him and have a belief and stick to it. Even if he would spend a lifetime disagreeing with you, you'd garner more respect from him. The problem with Starmer from the very beginning, I think through the election and through the 18 months of debacle, is he's tried to be, Annabel, all things to all people. And even when he was standing up, and the Greenland thing was a chance to say, I'm not doing this, America. You can be my ally, but this is not happening. No, we must sit down behind closed doors and have lots of discussions. I don't think he's a strong enough person. And I remember during the election thinking, you've made it such an open church for everybody to join Labour that I think you're going to spend most of your time not trying to rob Peter to pay Paul, but you know what I mean, trying to appease everybody. And that's what I see with this man. I don't care if I disagree with him. I'd like him to stick to something. Let's talk about the super Chinese embassy. I mean, what Prime Minister in your experience would ignore your own security services and say, no, I'm going to go ahead and build the biggest super embassy for China in Western Europe? We have complete fears, admitted by their security minister, Dan Jarvis, yesterday, that it could be a liability. There's going to be 200 extra super employees, diplomats. We've already got complete proof. Ian Duncan Smith made the point earlier that spying has happened and is very prevalent. Why would he allow this to happen? Another question. It's almost self-defeating, Annabel.
Well, it is. I think there are two intertwined issues, really. The first, Jeremy, as we've discussed earlier, is the state of the UK economy, and the idea that we might get some investment from China, some FDI from Beijing, is appealing to a Labour government which has none of the answers to all that ails Britain economically, and is scrambling around for ideas. And the second is, we have China generating our electricity. We have, it's acquired a stake in a nuclear power station here. Of course, we've got universities with very high proportion of Chinese students. Yep. So in many ways, we're so entangled with China, and this is very difficult to reverse. Now, this goes back to the Cameron-Osborne era and, this sort of golden era of relations that we were supposed to have with Beijing in the aftermath of Xi Jinping assuming supreme office in 2012. But over the years, as Ian Duncan Smith has said very robustly, we have become increasingly naive and almost in denial about the scale of espionage and things like the bounties on the head of UK-based Hong Kongers here. And wouldn't it be nice if we were able to take a more strong, robust position on China? But when are unable to do so. Now, part of this is because of our obsession with net zero, which makes us even more reliant on China for the components that are required, things like solar panels, all the while, of course, China belching out huge amounts of pollution, carbon into the atmosphere. So I think that, we're very dependent on them for net zero, we're very dependent on them for our, economic, well, we seem to think that we're dependent on them for our economic growth, even though they do make up quite a small percentage of overall UK exports. And the timing is interesting because Starmer is due to make a trip to Beijing early this year, the first prime minister to do so since 2018. And I wonder how that will be received in Washington, not least after you've had the Chinese super embassy approved, which Donald Trump will not be happy with.
But I was going to ask you.
Ally of China.
I was going to ask you because I asked Ian Duncan Smith a very direct question with a very direct answer. I said to him, "Do you believe that we now viewed as being in China's pocket if you're Keir Starmer?" And he went, "Yes." What do you think?
Well, I mean, it certainly appears to be that way. We had the refusal, as I say, to describe China as an enemy. We, are refusing to decouple from China to try and ensure that we are not so economically dependent on them. Look, we're not quite a Chinese vassal state yet, but the Labour government needs to wake up to the threat that this country quite clearly poses to us. And at the moment, we've just got politicians who want to stick their heads in the sand because they think that this is an easy way for them to duck some of the more difficult questions around, our behaviour over the last decade or so, the difficulties of disentangling ourselves from China and trying to get some sort of economic growth. But for how much longer is this going to go on? Because China, for well over a decade now, has made very clear that it is not some benign status quo power like a sort of giant Singapore that's focused on being rich rather than dominating the world, but rather, it wants to have enormous influence over Europe. Look at its closening relationship with Vladimir Putin. We've got to be honest about the axis of authoritarianism that is consolidating, and not only on an economic front, but also on a defence front. How many times, Jeremy, must you have heard Conservative politicians come on your show and say that we must increase defence spending? Well, we still don't know when we're going to have a commitment and a date for getting to just 3%. I get
very cynical with the Tories that say that, and I lay this. I could go for Starmer. Let's talk about 14 years. It started before May. They've done it with the police and they did it with the armed forces. They ridiculously believed there was no threat. They have looked at defence as an easy cut. There are less people. This sounds like a headline, Annabel. I want to move to something in a sec, but this is true. There are less people in our armed forces than illegal migrants have come into this country in the last 18 months. We're an island. It's a disgrace. Rishi Sunak, 2 days after the election, went 2.5%. What about the last 14 years? No, I'm a sham. I think it's disgraceful. Front page of your wonderful newspaper. Yes, fix your country. Trump tells Starmer. The other one I want to pick up on, you're the perfect lady for this because it's a very, very contentious story. We're going to speak this hour to Lucy Letby's lawyer, Mark McDonald, the killer nurse who yesterday found that she'll face no new criminal charges into the deaths of 2 more babies. Now, front of the Telegraph, MPs demand review of her convictions as cases are closed. We have to be careful, and we have to quite rightly say that the victims of those crimes are who we feel sorry for. The victims and their families and everybody that was affected. But there is, and you will know this, an enormous number of people who are still debating this trial and the justification and everything. It's on the front of the Telegraph. What's your take on the Lucy Letby situation? Because it seems to be, Annabel Denham, a story that won't go away.
It does. I think Lucy Letby has become something of a cause celeb, and we will continue to see campaigners calling for retrials, and there will be appeals which will go through the courts. Of course, she's already had some denied. My gut feeling is that the jury arrived at the right conclusion, and that justice is currently being served. What I would just say, Jeremy, is a sort of slightly tangential point, is that if you look at the sequencing of all of this, it seems apparent to me that the NHS's response, when some of the concerns were raised, very, very serious, grave concerns were raised, that the NHS's instinct was to try and close ranks and protect itself. And in many ways, this is the behaviour of an individual who seemingly, to me at least, was a monster who committed these atrocious acts and destroyed families. And our thoughts, of course, are with the bereaved. But I think that the NHS has serious questions to answer which probably won't be raised. And those who are in senior positions will probably find that, once again, it's a revolving door and they'll move from one senior position to another. And nobody will really, beyond Lucy Letby, be held accountable for what happened at that hospital to those poor babies. And I just wish that when we have these terrible scandals like this, then it would give cause for us to reflect on the failings of our National Healthcare Service, beyond, of course, the fact that we've got massive waiting lists and some of the poorest health outcomes of any developed country.
I completely agree with you. And the only thing I would add, and I'll let you go, is I completely agree that people get involved. But, David Davis, as an example, is an incredibly renowned, experienced politician. He has talked about the problems with this case for a long time. He's not a conspiracy theorist. And therein, the whole issue, you're so right the way you put it. We can talk about absolutely the horrors on the victims' families and what happened. We can talk about the NHS, undoubtedly we are. And there's no way that this woman should become sort of some celeb. But it's one of those stories, and it's front page of your paper today. The demand, for a review grows ever stronger on a daily basis. Annabel Denham, thank you so much. Before you go, light-hearted, because I know you like a laugh. Team Brooklyn or Team Posh and Becks, Annabel Denham?
I think I'm Team Brooklyn, having read that staggering. Oh, Jeremy disagrees.
No.
I felt quite sorry for him reading some of the allegations that he's made against his family. And my feeling is that somebody in his position doesn't choose to be famous, do they? And he has spent his entire life in the spotlight. And you can argue that he then pursued perhaps careers that kept him in the public eye, but it cannot have been easy for him. Nevertheless, it's never particularly pleasant, always a bit unedifying when
I'll tell you what's unpleasant.
To air their dirty laundry in public.
I'll tell you what's unedifying is if his mother did quirk or grind or whatever it is at his wedding. I mean, we did, and you can tell me to do one, but I know you've got a sense of humour. We did set out this morning and say, what's the most embarrassing thing that your mother's ever done to you? Well, mine's dead, so I can't tell the story. Have you got a story for us, Annabel? What's the most embarrassing thing your mother's done to you?
Oh, I couldn't do that, Jeremy. I'm sorry. I've just complained about people airing their dirty laundry.
Great line. Oh, Annabel
to the public.
Denham.
I'm not about to do it myself.
You are a journalist of supreme talent. We thank you so much today. I know how busy you are. Deputy Comment Editor for The Telegraph, Annabel Denham. Thank you very much indeed. Talking about the Chinese embassy, talking about Chagos